The stars above the battlefield were quiet, but the ground below was full of smoke, fire, and the sounds of war. Dust and ash floated in the air, making it hard to breathe. Ships had fallen from the sky. Tanks were broken in pieces. The once green fields of Moon Rest were now black with ash and metal. Thomas, a human soldier, moved carefully across the wreckage. His armor was damaged, and his arm bled from a sharp piece of shrapnel. But his eyes were sharp. He looked around for any signs of movement. He was not looking for the enemy. He was looking for his own. There were wounded soldiers nearby, and he had to reach them. The alliance between humans and the Solari Empire had ended just 2 hours ago. The peace talks had turned into a trap. A Solari warship fired the first shot. In seconds, the area turned into a battlefield. Most of the human troops had pulled back when the attack began. But not Thomas. He had heard the cries for help over the comms. He had seen the drop pods falling. He knew some soldiers were still here, cut off, hurt, and unable to move. Command had told him to retreat, but Thomas turned off the orders. He stayed. He moved quickly between the ruins of two tanks. Behind one, a soldier named Bren was lying with a crushed leg. His face was pale. His gun was broken. When he saw Thomas, he tried to speak, but no words came out. Thomas knelt beside him and checked his pulse. "You're not done yet," Thomas said calmly. He pulled out a small pain patch and pressed it to Bren's neck. The patch hissed softly, and Bren's breathing slowed. Thomas then grabbed a metal shield from a broken vehicle and lifted it to cover them both. There were Solari scouts nearby. Tall, sharp-armored creatures with glowing weapons. They moved with purpose, like hunters. One of them stopped, looking in Thomas's direction. But Thomas stayed still. His grip tightened on his rifle. The scout moved on. Thomas waited 10 more seconds, then lifted Bren over his shoulder. He carried him across open ground, using fire and smoke to hide their movement. His back screamed in pain, but he did not stop. He placed Bren safely behind a pile of rubble where 3 other wounded soldiers were hiding. "You came back," one of them whispered. "I never left," Thomas said. Above the battlefield, in the sky, the Solari command ship hovered. Inside the ship, Queen Nerea stood on a silver platform, watching the battle through a large glass wall. Her long robe flowed like smoke. Her skin was a rich teal blue, and her golden eyes narrowed as she watched the human soldier. She had expected fear. She had expected retreat. But this one was not following the pattern. He was moving alone, helping others, risking everything without gain. The Solari believed strength came from power and control. This human was showing a different kind of strength. It confused her. "Who is that?" she asked quietly. One of her generals stepped forward, a human soldier. "We believe his name is Thomas. He was supposed to retreat." "He did not." Nerea said nothing. Her mind was full of thoughts. The humans were supposed to break easily. That was what her war council had told her. But now she was seeing something else, something strange. A kind of courage she could not explain. On the ground, Thomas was not thinking about honor or courage. He was thinking about survival. He checked his ammo. Only 9 shots left. He checked the wounded. 3 were unconscious. 1 could walk. The others needed help. He had no medevac, no working comms, no backup. He would have to protect them until someone came, or until the enemy reached them. He started setting up traps. Small devices that would make noise or fire smoke when triggered. He found a broken turret and repaired its auto sensor. He gave the walking soldier his last pistol and told him to stay hidden. "And watch the others. You're going to hold this place?" the soldier asked. Thomas gave a short nod. "All by yourself?" Thomas didn't answer. He just loaded his rifle and looked toward the smoke dot in the Solari command ship. Queen Nerea leaned closer to the screen. The human was not hiding. He was preparing to fight, alone. Against all odds, send a drone. She said, "I want to see him up close." A small silver drone flew from the ship and hovered near Thomas's position. It was silent, nearly invisible. But Thomas noticed it. He looked up at it for a moment. Then he turned away and went back to building defenses. He had no time to waste. Nerea watched him through the drone's lens. She watched how he moved, how he checked every wounded person, how he stood when others were lying down. Her general stepped forward again. "Shall I send in the strike squad?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "No, not yet." The general blinked in confusion. "Your Majesty, I want to see how far he will go," she said softly. Thomas stood on top of the rubble. Now, his rifle ready, his armor scratched, his face calm. He looked into the distance where Solari warriors were moving. He was outnumbered, outgunned. But he stood there, guarding the injured, with no sign of fear. Nerea leaned back from the glass wall. For the first time in many years, she was silent, not because she didn't know what to say, but because she didn't understand what she was feeling. Bravery was not new to her, but this was different. This was something that could not be ordered or taught. It was something chosen, and it left her speechless. Smoke continued to rise from the battlefield. The ground was quiet for a moment, but only for a moment. The Solari soldiers were gathering. They were waiting for orders. And high above, inside her command ship, Queen Nerea stood still, her golden eyes focused on the lone human who had refused to leave. Thomas had now finished placing traps around the injured soldiers. He had no more explosives, no more tech, only his rifle and his will. He sat behind a broken wall, keeping his eyes on the open field ahead. His muscles ached and blood had dried along the side of his neck, but he didn't care. He was not leaving, not while his people were still breathing. Inside the Solari ship, General Cavour stepped forward. His armor was polished, his face cold and proud. He bowed slightly before speaking. "Your Majesty, our troops are ready. One order and the human will fall. The rest are wounded and helpless. They will be wiped out quickly." Nerea did not answer right away. She turned back toward the viewing screen. The drone still floated silently above the ruins, recording every move Thomas made. She watched as he checked the pulse of a soldier. He took a blanket from a dead body and covered one of the injured. He spoke to no one. He simply acted. Cavour noticed her delay. The longer we wait, the greater the chance he escapes, or that others return for him. We must crush their spirit. Nerea finally spoke. "Send the elite guard, but tell them to capture him alive." Cavour blinked in surprise. "Alive? Yes, I want to speak with him." The general hesitated but gave the order. 10 of the Solari's finest warriors dropped from the ship in silence. They landed without sound. Their armor was black, marked with the Queen's crest. Each one was trained to fight in darkness, trained to strike without mercy. They were the pride of the Solari Empire. Thomas heard them before he saw them, a soft shift in the wind, a small crunch on broken stone. He raised his rifle and narrowed his eyes. Then he moved, quiet, fast. He didn't fire yet. He wanted to know where they were. The enemy was smart. He had to be smarter. He threw a small stone across the field. One of the traps activated with a sharp hiss. Releasing a cloud of smoke, a Solari warrior stepped out, expecting an attack. But Thomas was not there. He had already moved. The first shot came from behind the wall. One Solari dropped, another raised a shield. But before they could regroup, another trap went off. Sparks filled the air. Thomas used the chaos to run to a better position. He fired again, hitting one in the leg. But he knew he couldn't win. Not against 10 trained fighters. He wasn't trying to win. He was buying time. Every second they spent chasing him was another second the wounded might survive. The Solari guard circled him. One tried to tackle him. Thomas rolled and slammed the back of his rifle into the guard's helmet. The hit broke the weapon. Now he had no gun, only a broken piece of metal and a knife. He stood, breathing hard, waiting for the next strike. Above, Nerea watched in silence. Her fingers were tight around the edge of the command table. She could see the blood on his hands, the cuts on his face, the way he stood, still ready even when he had no weapon left. One of her advisors stepped close. "He will die if we do not stop them." She said nothing, but her hand moved. She pressed a button. A high signal was sent to the guard. Down below, the Solari warriors froze. Then one of them stepped forward and spoke in their language. You have been ordered to surrender. The queen demands your capture, not your death. Thomas stared at them. He could barely stay on his feet. His shoulder throbbed with pain. His legs felt heavy. He had no more fight left, but something inside him still pushed back. He looked around. The wounded were still breathing, hidden, safe. That was all that mattered. He dropped the broken metal piece and raised his hands, slowly. Carefully, the Solari warriors moved in. They tied his hands and lifted him into the air. One of them whispered something cold in his ear. Thomas didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. Disgust, confusion, maybe even respect. Back on the ship, Nerea turned away from the screen. Bring him to me, she said. Cavor spoke again. You will speak to a human prisoner. In person, yes, I want to know why he fought so hard. I want to hear it from his mouth. Cavor did not argue this time. He gave a nod and walked away to prepare the throne room. As Thomas was taken into the Solari ship, he looked around. The inside was dark and cold, sharp metal walls, blue lights in every corner. He was pushed down a hallway and into a large open chamber. At the far end, Queen Nerea stood, tall and still, like a statue carved from crystal. Thomas stared at her. She looked different from what he had expected. Not cruel, not angry, just calm, quiet, watching. She stepped down from the platform. Her golden eyes met his. You were given a chance to leave. She said, Why didn't you take it? Thomas stood straight, even with his hands tied. Because someone had to stay, he replied. The words were simple. No anger, no fear. Queen Nerea did not speak for a long time. She studied his face, his voice, his body language. Then, without warning, she turned and walked away. Put him in a holding cell, she ordered, but do not harm him. As the guards took Thomas away, the queen stood alone in the chamber. Her heart was steady, her mind full of thoughts she had never allowed before. She did not understand the human, but she wanted to. And for the first time in her life, she questioned what strength really meant. The cell was cold and silent. A single light above flickered now and then. The walls were smooth, made of dark silver stone that felt colder than ice. There was no bed, no seat, and no window. Only silence. Thomas sat on the floor, his back straight, against the wall. His hands were no longer tied, but guards stood outside the door, watching through a clear panel. He did not speak. He did not ask for anything. His eyes stayed alert, his breath steady, even here. He stayed ready. Hours passed. He had no way to tell time, but he guessed it was morning now. Somewhere far from here, his people were regrouping, or maybe falling apart. He didn't know. All he knew was that the wounded he had protected were safe for now. The door opened with a quiet hiss. A Solari officer stepped inside. He was tall, with dark armor and green markings across his face. His name was Vark, one of Queen Nerea's trusted advisors. He looked down at Thomas with calm eyes. You are not like the others, Vark said. You did not run when you had the chance. Thomas stood slowly. I was not raised to run. Vark tilted his head slightly. Our queen wants to test you. She believes your courage is more than luck. She wants to see how far it goes. Thomas didn't respond. You will face the trial of honor, Vark continued. If you survive, she may release you. If you fail, you will not leave this ship alive. Thomas raised an eyebrow. What kind of trial? No weapons, no fighting. Only the truth, only your thoughts. The Solari call it the fire of the mind. It shows who you really are. Thomas nodded once. Then I'm ready. Vark looked at him with curiosity, then turned and walked out. 2 guards entered. They said nothing. Thomas followed them without resistance. They walked through long halls filled with glowing lights and quiet whispers. Other Solari soldiers stopped and stared at him. Some looked angry. Some looked confused. One even gave him a small nod of respect. At last, they reached a large chamber. It was round and smooth, with strange patterns carved into the floor. A tall chair stood in the center, made of shining crystal. Thomas was told to sit. Queen Nerea entered without sound. She wore a simple dark robe with silver patterns on the edges. She did not speak as she stepped onto a raised platform in front of him. Round her, 6 members of the Solari High Circle stood silently. Varks spoke first. "Human soldier Thomas, you stand before the trial of honor. You will not be harmed. You will not be lied to. You will only be shown visions. If you survive, then without breaking, you may be allowed to walk free." Thomas said nothing. He simply gave a small nod. A thin crown was placed on his head. It connected to the seat with a soft pulse of light. The chamber dimmed. Silence filled the air. Then the lights turned red. The first vision came quickly. He was back on Earth, standing outside his childhood home. His mother was on the steps, waving goodbye. He was only 16, wearing his training suit, ready to leave for the academy. The image felt real. The wind, the sounds, the warm light on his face. But he knew it wasn't real. A voice spoke from the air. "Why did you leave them? Why did you choose war?" Thomas breathed slowly. So they would never have to. The vision changed. He was now on a battlefield again, years later. A young soldier beside him screamed after being hit. Thomas crawled through mud, pulled him to cover, and held pressure on the wound until help came. His hands were shaking. His heart was pounding. The voice returned. "Why do you carry the pain of others? Why not let someone else do it?" Thomas whispered. "Because I can." The vision changed again. This time, he saw the faces of the men and women he couldn't save. People he lost, friends, commanders, civilians, each one stared at him with silent eyes. One of them mouthed the words, "You failed." Thomas looked down for a moment, but then he lifted his head. "No, I did what I could, and I will do it again." Suddenly, the visions ended. The chamber lights turned white. The crown was lifted from his head. He blinked, breathing harder now. Sweat ran down his face. His hands trembled, but only for a second. Then they were still again. The Solari Council remained silent. Queen Nerea stepped forward. She looked down at Thomas, studying his face. "You saw fear, pain, failure. And still, you did not break." Thomas looked up. "Everyone feels fear. Bravery is not being without it. Bravery is choosing to move anyway." Nerea stood very still. The others waited for her words. At last, she spoke. "You passed the trial. You may return to your cell and rest. Tomorrow, we speak again." The guards stepped forward. Thomas stood and followed. But before he left the room, he turned back. "Queen Nerea," he said, "if your people knew what fear really felt like, they might understand what strength really is." Nerea said nothing. She only watched as he walked out. Later that night, she sat alone in her private chamber. She replayed the trial on her data screen. She watched his face, his answers, his silence. She had seen warriors, commanders, and kings take the trial. Many had failed. Many had lied. But this human had spoken nothing but truth. And it shook something inside her. She did not yet know what to do with that feeling. But she could no longer ignore it. This man, this human soldier, had walked through the fire of the mind, and he had not surrendered. The next day began with silence. Thomas had not slept much. The trial of honor still echoed in his mind. He sat on the floor of his cell again, eyes open, mind focused. His body was sore, but his spirit remained firm. He did not know what Queen Nerea would decide next, but he was ready for anything. A soft sound came from the door. It opened slowly. Two Solari guards stepped inside. One of them carried a folded dark robe. The other spoke calmly. "The queen has invited you to the throne chamber. You will come without chains. Wear this robe. It shows you passed the trial." Thomas stood, nodded once, and took the robe. It was heavy but smooth, with silver lines stitched into the shoulders. He put it on without a word. The guards led him through the long halls again. This time, no one stared. No one whispered. The guards walked with more respect, as if something had changed. When the large doors of the throne chamber opened, Thomas stepped inside alone. The room was brighter than before. The floor reflected the ceiling above, which showed stars and galaxies. Slowly turning in silence, at the far end stood Queen Nerea. She was no longer wearing her battle robe. Instead, she wore something simpler, like a long coat made of dark blue silk. Thomas walked forward until the guards motioned for him to stop. Queen Nerea stepped down from her platform and walked toward him. She stopped a few steps away and looked into his eyes. "You are different from what I was told about humans," she said. Thomas answered, "Maybe your people were told the wrong things." The queen gave a quiet nod. "That may be true. You fought like a warrior. You protected like a leader. You spoke with truth, even when the truth hurt." Thomas kept his voice steady. "I didn't come here to be your prisoner. I came to protect my own. That hasn't changed." The queen's golden eyes narrowed slightly, but not in anger. She was studying him, trying to understand something deeper. "You were supposed to die down there," she said. "Any other soldier would have left. You stayed. They were still breathing. That was enough." There was a long pause. Then she asked a question that surprised even her guards. "Have you ever hated the Solari?" Thomas thought for a moment. "I've hated war. I've hated loss. But hate never helped me save anyone. So I try not to waste energy on it." Queen Nerea walked to the side, facing the stars on the ceiling. "My people believe strength comes from power, from fear, from never bending. But you stood alone with nothing, and yet you would not fall. You chose pain over safety. That is a kind of strength we do not teach." She turned back to him. "Perhaps I must learn what you know." Thomas didn't answer. He was listening carefully. This wasn't just a conversation. Something was changing. Slowly, quietly, the queen gestured for him to follow her. They walked down a private hallway that opened into a smaller room. There was no throne here. No guards, just a single round table and 2 chairs. "Sit," she said. Thomas sat. She took the seat across from him. For the first time, they looked more like equals than enemies. "I want to understand you," she said. "Not as a prisoner, not as a soldier, just as a man." Thomas looked around the room. No cameras, no audience. "This is real." "Yes," she replied. "No lies, no masks." Thomas leaned forward slightly. "What do you want to know?" Nerea paused. "What gives you the strength to do what you did? What makes you stay when everyone else runs?" Thomas took a deep breath. "It's not about strength. It's about choice. I don't fight because I love war. I fight because peace is worth protecting. And I don't run because someone has to stand between danger and the people behind me." The queen was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke in a softer voice. "I was trained from birth to lead through fear. I was told love and kindness are weak. But when I watched you, bleeding and surrounded, still pulling your people to safety, I felt something I had never felt before." Thomas didn't move. He saw the shift in her eyes. Not weakness, not fear, something closer to doubt, and maybe even respect. She continued, "I have ruled for many years. I have faced threats, enemies, traitors, but I have never faced someone who can make me question everything I was taught." Thomas said, "Then maybe it's time to question it." Nerea stood and walked to a window that looked out into space. Stars moved slowly, glowing against the black sky. She stood there for a long time. "You are still my prisoner," she said, "but I will not treat you like one." Thomas stood up. "I didn't expect kindness, just fairness." She looked over her shoulder at him. "Then I will try to give you both." Guards entered the room again, but they did not grab Thomas or lead him away by force. One of them simply said, "You will be taken to guest quarters, a room with a bed and food." Thomas gave a short nod to the queen. "If you ever want the truth again, you know where to find me." He followed the guards without another word. Queen Nerea stood alone in the quiet room. She placed her hand on the table where he had sat. This human had changed something in her. Not with weapons, not with orders, but with the simple act of standing, firm when no one else would. And that, more than any victory in battle, left her speechless once again. The guest quarters were quiet and calm, for the first time since the battle. Thomas had a real bed and a warm meal. He ate slowly, thinking about everything that had happened. He did not trust the comfort. He knew it could be taken away at any time. But for now, he rested. His body needed it. The room had no lock. No guard stood at the door. The Queen had kept her word. But Thomas stayed alert. He knew that safety, especially on an enemy ship, was never permanent. He lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Thoughts of his injured team came to his mind. Were they still alive? Had help reached them? Would they know he had stayed behind to protect them? These questions gave him no peace. The next morning, the door opened with a soft sound. A familiar face stepped in. It was Vark, the Queen's advisor. He stood tall, his hands behind us. "Back, the Queen requests your presence," Vark said. Thomas stood and followed him without a word. They walked through the silver halls once again. This time, fewer Solari watched him. Those who did gave quiet nods, not of fear or anger, but of something closer to respect. They reached a long chamber that looked like a temple. Tall stone walls stood on each side, carved with the stories of Solari rulers. At the center stood a platform with a glowing floor. Queen Nerea waited there. Thomas stepped forward. She looked at him carefully. "You have passed the trial of the mind," she said. "Now, if you agree, you will take part in the trial of honor." Thomas nodded slowly. "What does this one test?" "Honor, loyalty, and truth," she said. "But this time, others will judge. You will face a group of Solari warriors, thinkers, and citizens. They will ask you questions. They will challenge your words. You must answer with nothing but truth. If they believe you are worthy, your status will change." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Change to what?" Nerea answered, "From prisoner to guest. From outsider to possible ally." He stood taller. "I accept." Nerea stepped back. A circle of Solari entered the chamber. Each one wore a different robe. One was a war general, one a scholar. Another looked like a healer. There were 6 in total. Vark stood at the side and raised his hand. "The trial begins now," he said. The first question came from the general. "You lost the battle. You had no way to win. Why did you stay behind?" Thomas looked him in the eyes. "Because leaving would have meant giving up on those who couldn't run. I would rather stand and fall with them than live knowing I abandoned them." The general gave a short nod. Next, the scholar spoke. "Your species is younger than ours. You have less history, less knowledge. What makes you think your way is better?" Thomas answered, "I don't think our way is better. I think it's ours, just like yours is yours. But that doesn't mean we can't learn from each other." The healer leaned forward. "You saw many wounded, yet you kept fighting. Did you not fear becoming one of them?" Thomas took a breath. "I was already hurt, but fear didn't help them. Action did." A soft whisper ran through the group. None of the judges expected such clear and simple answers. There was no pride in his voice, no false power, only honesty. A younger Solari, dressed in gray, asked next, "Would you fight again? Even for strangers?" Thomas nodded. "If they needed me, yes." The last judge, an elder with silver eyes, asked the final question. "You were our enemy. You killed some of our soldiers. Why should we trust you now?" Thomas looked at him without blinking. "I never wanted war, but I protected my people. If peace is possible, I will work for it. But if war returns, I will still protect those I care about." "You may not like that, but it's the truth." The judges turned to speak among themselves. Nerea waited silently. Thomas stood still. He felt no fear. He had said what needed to be said. After a short time, the judges turned back. "Vark, step forward. The circle has decided. You have spoken with honor and shown respect. You are no longer a prisoner of this ship. From now on, you are a guest of the crown." Queen Nerea stepped forward. "You may walk freely. You will be watched, but not guarded. You will eat at our tables, and you will speak with me when called." Thomas gave a respectful nod. "Understood." Later that evening, Thomas stood near a large window in one of the higher decks. He watched stars move slowly in the dark. For the first time since being captured, he was not behind walls. Nerea joined him quietly. They stood side by side. "You spoke well today," she said. "I didn't speak to impress anyone." Thomas replied, "That is why they listen," she said. They were quiet for a long time. "Do you still see me as your enemy?" she asked. "Thomas, looked at her. No, he said. I see someone trying to understand what she was never taught. She turned to face him. Then maybe we can learn something from each other. He gave a small nod. Maybe, in that moment, the cold space between them began to warm. Not with fire, not with light, but with something harder to break. Respect, and perhaps the first seed of trust. Thomas now walked the halls of the Solari flagship as a guest, not a prisoner. The guards no longer followed his every step. Solari crew members watched him with mixed expressions, some with confusion, some with quiet interest. A few even gave him polite nods. No one expected a human to stand beside their queen without chains. Yet here he was every day. Thomas spent an hour speaking with Queen Nerea. Their talks began with simple questions about Earth, human life, and the meaning of courage. But over time, their conversations deepened. They spoke about leadership, war, and the cost of peace. They spoke not as enemies, but as to people, shaped by conflict and burdened with duty. On the seventh day, Nerea called for Thomas again. This time, he was taken to a quiet room filled with glowing maps and more data. Stars blinked across the screen. Solari battle routes moved across space like flowing rivers. Thomas stepped inside and looked around. He could feel tension in the air. Nerea stood near the center. She was not wearing her usual dark robes. Instead, she wore a lighter uniform with no crown. Her face looked tired, as if she had not slept much. "There's trouble," she said before Thomas could speak. "What happened?" he asked. "One of my generals has broken away from the fleet," she said. "He believes I have grown weak by showing you mercy. He wants to continue the war and destroy the human alliance completely." Thomas stepped closer. "You think he will attack?" "He already has," Nerea replied. "He struck one of our supply ships near the edge of neutral space. The crew survived. But the message is clear. He wants open war." Thomas narrowed his eyes. "What will you do?" Nerea looked at the map. "If I go after him with force, more will join him. If I do nothing, he will grow stronger." "You're trapped," Thomas said. "Yes," she replied, "but not helpless." She turned toward him. "I want you to help me." Thomas was surprised. "Help you how?" "Speak to the crew. Let them see the human they once feared. Show them that peace is not weakness. You have done it once in battle. Do it again with words." Thomas paused. "They will not listen to me. They will if I stand beside you," Nerea said. Thomas nodded slowly. "Then I'll do it." Later that day, Nerea stood with Thomas before a gathering of Solari officers in the Great Hall. The room was filled with warriors, advisors, and ship captains. All had heard whispers of the Queen's meetings with the human soldier. Now they saw it for themselves. Nerea raised her voice. "Some of you believe I have lost my edge. Some think I have gone soft. You are wrong." She turned slightly and gestured toward Thomas. "This man stood alone against 10 of our best. He fought not for power, not for pride, but to protect. He passed trials that many of our own fail. He did not ask for peace. He earned it." The crowd was silent. Thomas stepped forward. He did not raise his voice. He spoke clearly and calmly. "I do not stand here to ask for your trust. I stand here to show you that respect is possible between enemies. You call me brave, but I am only one of many. There are others like me, and maybe there are others like you." A few officers nodded. Some did not, but no one walked out. After the gathering ended, Nerea and Thomas returned to the command room. She looked more hopeful. "That was better than I expected," she said. Thomas smiled faintly. "That's not saying much." She gave a soft laugh. "No, it isn't, but small steps matter." As they spoke, a sudden alert filled the room. Lights flashed red. A Solari officer rushed in. "Emergency signal," he said. "The rebel general is attacking a human convoy. 3 ships have already fallen. One carries civilians." Thomas's eyes sharpened. "Location." The officer pointed to the map. It was close to close. The rebel general was not waiting for orders. He wanted chaos. Nerea looked at Thomas. "We cannot let this continue." "I agree," Thomas said. "We move now." Nerea nodded. "Then come with me. You know how your people fight. I will need your insight." They walked together to the main deck. Alarms still echoed across the ship. Orders were given. Shields were charged. Fighters launched from bays. The Scifi flagship moved into battle. Position. Thomas stood at Nerea's side as the stars outside twisted and turned. The ship entered the conflict zone in moments. On the screen, small human ships were struggling. The rebel Scifi forces outnumbered them. Nerea gave her orders. Target their engines. Do not destroy unless needed. We disable and rescue. Thomas added, send out a signal to the human fleet. Let them know we're helping. If they see your ships without warning, they may fire back. Nerea nodded. The message was sent. Within minutes, the battle changed. The Queen's forces struck fast but carefully. One Scifi rebel ship was disabled. Another tried to flee but was caught in a tractor beam. Human ships, at first defensive, began to regroup. They saw who had arrived. A strange moment came. For the first time in the war, Scifi and human ships were fighting side by side. Thomas watched the screen. This is the start of something new. Nerea looked at him, or the return of something lost. The rebel general's ship was hit and pulled into stasis. The battle was over. No more shots fired. No more explosions. Only silence. Later that night, Thomas stood outside, looking at the stars. Nerea joined him. You changed more than just minds today, she said. You may have changed our future. Thomas replied. It's not over yet. There will be others like him. I know, she said. But now they know we stand together. That changes everything for a long time. Neither of them spoke. The stars above them were quiet again. But this time not because of war. This time, it was peace beginning to take shape. The stars were calm, but the galaxy was not. News of the rebel general's defeat spread quickly across Scifi space and the human colonies. It was not just about the battle. It was about who stood side by side during it. A human soldier and the alien queen had fought together, not as enemies, but as allies. Many called it a miracle. Others called it a mistake. But everyone was talking. Thomas sat in the Scifi ship's observation chamber. It was quiet here. He watched Earth through the large window. This was his first time seeing his home planet since he had been left behind on the battlefield. Now, everything felt different. He heard the soft sound of the doors opening behind him. He didn't turn. He already knew who it was. Queen Nerea stepped beside him. Her eyes were fixed on Earth as well. It's beautiful, she said. Thomas nodded. It is. And it's still standing. Nerea crossed her arms slowly. The human government has agreed to send a delegation. They want peace talks again. Good, Thomas replied. But they won't forget what happened. Neither side will. They shouldn't, Nerea said. But maybe they will learn from it. There was a pause. Do you think your people will trust me? She asked quietly. Thomas gave a small shrug. Some will, some won't. Same on your side. But they don't have to trust us today. They just have to listen. Later that day, the Scifi flagship arrived at the edge of Earth's orbit. A welcome signal was sent by human command. It was not warm, but it was not hostile either. That was progress. Thomas walked down the ramp of the shuttle beside Queen Nerea. Waiting for them on the ground were high-ranking human officers, diplomats, and a few news crews. Cameras rolled. Soldiers stood ready but relaxed. General Marcus, the human commander, stepped forward. His face was hard, but his voice was respectful. Thomas, you've been busy. Thomas gave a small smile. Had to keep myself entertained. Marcus looked at Nerea. Your Majesty, you've come a long way. Nerea gave a short bow. So has your soldier. There was no handshake, but there was no weapon drawn either. That was enough. Inside the base, talks began. The room was filled with translators, advisors, and guards from both sides. Thomas sat between the two groups. At first, the air was cold. Every word was measured. Every look was cautious. But over hours, and then days, the words became softer. Terms were proposed, borders redrawn, plans for shared patrols and trade routes took shape. Thomas didn't speak much during the meetings, but his presence reminded both sides what could be lost and what could be gained. On the third day, Queen Nerea called for him again. This time, she wore her crown. Her face was calm but thoughtful. "There's something I want to offer," she said. "A joint command, a team made of both Solari and human forces, peacekeepers, not conquerors." Thomas blinked. "You want me to lead it? I want you to help build it," she replied. "Others will follow if they see you believe in it." He stood in silence for a moment. Then he said, "I'll do it." A week later, the agreement was signed for the first time in history. Two races who had nearly destroyed each other would now build together. The team would be called the Horizon Guard. Its mission was clear: protect peace, help rebuild, and prevent the rise of war on either side. Thomas stood before the new recruits of the Horizon Guard. Humans and Solari stood in the same line, wearing a new symbol on their uniforms, a rising sun between two stars. He looked at them and spoke. "I don't care where you're from. I care what you stand for. We're here because too many have died, because too many believe the other side would never change. Let's prove them wrong." Behind him, Queen Nerea watched with quiet pride. After the ceremony, she walked with him through the base garden. It was evening. The sky was red and gold. "You've done more than I expected," she said. "I didn't do it alone," Thomas replied. They stopped near a small fountain. Nerea looked up. "When I first saw you on that battlefield, I thought you were reckless. A fool." Thomas smiled. "You weren't wrong. But I was blind too," she said. "I saw humans as small and weak. But your strength isn't just in muscle or weapons. It's in your heart. You risk everything for those you care about." Thomas looked at her. "And you changed. You listened. That takes more strength than any soldier." There was silence between them. Not awkward, just peaceful. Then Nerea said, "So what comes next?" Thomas looked at the stars. "We keep building. We protect what we've started. And we stay ready for what's out there." She followed his gaze. "There's always something out there," she said. "But this time," Thomas replied, "we won't face it alone." They stood together under the growing night, two leaders from two worlds, two warriors who had once been enemies. Now they stood not as symbols of war, but as the first light of something new. Not the end of a war, but the beginning of peace.